Oh, is everyone back? Pedro, are we ready to start? Okay, so tonight, Roger Shikan will speak to us about the three Dharma Seals. Thank you very much, Shikan.
Thank you, Jishin. Feels good to be here tonight and get to talk about my dear teacher, Maizumi Roshi, the three Dharma Seals. As I was reading over the short chapter here, I was reflecting on the difference for me between, most of you were here when we studied Reb's book, I think, and Reb Anderson's teaching, how it's different from Maizumi's. Reb seems more devotional. He gets a little ethereal, I've been told at times, and I think that's natural sometimes. Maizumi Roshi, just over reading these first few chapters, his teaching is more visceral to me. He's really saying, appreciate your life. Let's live this life. It's our life. Let's live it. Appreciate it and directly confront the big questions about it. The great matter of impermanence and no self and how we find peace in this life. And I'm remembering how he said, I don't remember if it was in this chapter or one before, where he says, life is ungraspable. Why is it ungraspable? Because it's limitless. And so every part of this life, when we contemplate the truth of the teaching of impermanence, every part of this life is ungraspable, including ourself, all parts of ourself, our bodily self, our mental self, our emotional self, our spiritual self, our devotional self, and our being, our very being. That which we can perceive and describe about it is impermanent. And, I really appreciate the way Maizumi Roshi points out that, the true test of reality is our direct experience of it. So he's always pointing us back to here and now. How are we existing right here and now? And so these are three of the most fundamental teachings of Buddha's teaching. It's kind of the bedrock, and he's kind of leading up in the first couple chapters to these three Dharma Seals. Again and again, we're reminded of the impermanence and the no self and how that helps us realize peace. I wanted to go back to page 5, where he says, one understanding of life and death is the life and death of the instant. According to Dogen Zenji, the founder of Japanese Soto Zen, Shakyamuni Buddha said that in 24 hours, our life is born and dying, rising and falling. It's hard to count all the zeros, but I think it's 6.5 billion times. So in 1 second, our life is born and dies around 70,000 times. Our conscious mind can't even imagine such an occurrence. So the big question he asks is, what kind of life is this? And there's an old saying that you can never step into the same river twice. And, this is a reflection on our life. We're never the same self twice. There's billions of chemical reactions going on inside our body that we're not aware of. Just like we can't comprehend the fact that every part of us is in constant movement and change, arising and disappearing and dissolving all the time, timelessly. So one Zen master that I was reading, I think it was Nagarjuna, but I can't remember. He was one of the more philosophical Zen teachers. But it irks me when someone talks about Zen as being philosophical, because it's anything but, But it's, before I get into that, I'll say this may be the third or fourth time that I've said this here in this group. But in Reb's book, in page 86, he says, in chapter 16 of the Lotus Sutra, the Buddha says, I am always thinking. The Buddha is thinking, how may I lead all living beings to enter the unexcelled path and quickly to perfect the Buddha body? This discursive thought is always present in Buddha's deep tranquility without disturbing it. Buddhas may think, may all beings be happy, and may all beings quickly enter the Buddha way. But they don't grasp those thoughts. They calmly offer them as gifts. So we try our best to calmly offer our thoughts as gifts, and we don't grasp them, so we're certainly not encouraging the rest of us to grasp them, but to, as Egyoku Maizumi Roshi's, one of his Dharma heirs, in the preface says, listen to the talks with your whole being. Receive it with your whole being. Don't grasp the thoughts. It's not about the thoughts. The thoughts are pointing to our being here and now. So Nagarjuna, get back to him for a minute. He said there really can't be any continuity of separate things in existence. Continuity implies identity as a self or entity. No such identity is possible because the very means of identification fluctuate and change. Continuity and permanency are illusions created by memory, mere mental projections of a pattern that itself can't be grasped and is always in constant flux. So, Thich Nhat Hanh, the great Buddha, Thich Nhat Hanh, said that, the flow of our life force is like a river flowing. And just imagine standing on this vast river and the water's just flowing by, and it's never the same water, and it's never the same experience that we're experiencing. But Reb's teaching was that this life force, this flow, can be thought of and can be experienced as a vast ocean of compassion. And that what relieves us from suffering is a deep understanding of the intimacy we share with all beings. And I've had many doubts about this. We all have, because we're so deeply conditioned to think of ourselves as separate body minds. We all have doubts about this. So there's no, we talk about stories in Zen a lot. Don't cling to your stories. Well, the story of all things are one is a story. That things are separate is a story. But beyond the confines of stories, we can gradually begin to intuit. There's a vast peace and support that is an ocean of compassion. And just the fact that we all are here now is evidence enough of our interbeing. Thich Nhat Hanh says, to be is to interbe. Nothing can be separate from being and still be. So I was having a beautiful day with my dog. A couple days ago, it was 85 degrees, and we went walking in the woods, and the leaves were swirling. And I wrote a short little poem. Be only being, know only being, and love only being. This does not imply any rejection of people or things, but rather the felt understanding that all people and things are an appearance of the one infinite reality, infinite being, our being. So when we dwell on impermanence, it helps us to go beyond all concepts. Through Zazen, our actual experience reveals that thinking itself is ungraspable. It's not what we think it is. And impermanence also makes everything possible. Our suffering can turn to joy. Everything is always changing, so nothing's fixed. Nothing will stay the same. So there's a freedom there, the boundlessness of life, the ungraspability of it all. We're always free to step out of the conceptual box, the box of self that we think we are. A couple of months ago, 2 or 3 months ago, Jishin offered a short little saying from Rupert Spira, who I like a lot. And she was quoting him, "Security and happiness can't be found in anything that comes and goes. Find whatever it is in your experience that doesn't appear, move, change, or disappear. And invest your identity, security, and happiness in that alone." So it's our clinging to our dualistic conceptual structures about separate self and phenomena that prevent us from paying attention to the changeless that is always here in us. And another such strong evidence of our interbeing is that we all have that intuitive sense that there is something in our life that never changes. Something's been here, present, continuously, timelessly. And it's all of our experience if we look deeply. Take Thich Nhat Hanh's advice and look deeply at our life. The only words I have for it, even though they're inadequate, is just the awareness of being present. Whatever's ever happened in our life, it's always happened now. It's always happened here. And it's always been a witness to what's ever going on. It's what we are without change, and what we are without change. That's what we are, with no doubt. And it's what we all really want deeply. So it is possible, when we learn to accept suffering, accept the unconditional acceptance, patience, generosity, and compassion of our infinite nature. It's possible that we get to that point where we just are what we want, and we want what we are. We don't need anything else. So, my God, I've been going 15 minutes already. All right. So there was something I wanted to read about a separate self here. Where is it? Too many pages here. Oh, here we go. So impermanence is looking at reality from the point of view of time. Well, that's too abstract for you. If things are impermanent, they are without a separate self. If things are without a separate self, it means that they are impermanent. Impermanence means being transformed at every moment. This is reality. And since there is nothing unchanging, how can there be a permanent self, a separate self? When we say self, we mean something that is always itself, unchanging day after day. But nothing is like that. Our body is impermanent, our emotions are impermanent, and our perceptions are impermanent. Our anger, our sadness, our love, our hatred, and our consciousness are also impermanent. So we can see how the teachings of impermanence and no self just means no separate self, no permanent self. We're all in this sea of life together. None of us are any more in it, like I said a while back, any more than any wave is any more in the ocean or any wetter than any other part of the ocean. We don't have to grasp those thoughts. Just be here, you know. So when we let our resistance to impermanence and no separate self be surrendered, our experience begins to become like transparent to our nature of the peace of nirvana. We begin to embrace our experience as the same stuffless stuff of nirvana, and nirvana pervades our experience. And this transparency enables us to offer our experience, giving away our life, offering our life, our suffering too. We can give away our suffering as much as we can give away our bliss. And realizing that it's always already, impermanence teaches us that it's already being given away. It's already going away from us. We can't hold on to it. All we have to do is let go, right? But we don't do the letting go, we allow the letting go. So I wanted to finish with a poem from Rupert Spira, which really touches on these three Dharma Seals for me. It's entitled, Every Time I Open My Eyes. Every time I open my eyes, I invite the world to take shape. And every time the world takes shape, I'm invited to open my eyes. Every time I open my eyes, I invite the world to take shape. And every time the world takes shape, I'm invited to open my eyes and see the world, raw and naked, holding out its hand, calling me into itself, where I'm taken into the transparency of things and find myself transparent there. Standing on the edge, looking down and into the dark, silent pool in which the world is cradled, and I am cradled there, held with all things, and hold all things in myself. Myself, not a thing in the world, but this here, scene in which the world opens, inviting and offering itself. And every time it is seen, it dies. And in dying, it holds out its hand, asking again to be taken in. And every time I take it in, I too die. And in dying am known as this, here, seeing. Every time I open my eyes. So, yeah, I didn't talk. Okay, we've got some time. Let's have some discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Roger. That was excellent. It's funny, I read this chapter a couple of times, and I had read the whole book a number of years ago. And what you just said, I didn't get. I got other things. And so in the very, very first paragraph of this chapter, for me, it's just telling me, because I have trouble having faith, you know, just say that word to me, I'm like hooked up with some religious thing, you know, and I'm in faith in some mystery that I can't see. He's not saying, here he's telling us, you know, don't just believe everything that's here, test it. And how do you test it? Practice it and see what the results are. Very practical, and this works for me. This is wonderful, because I've had discussions about that. You know, I kept on seeing the word faith pop up in this book, and I said, I left that a long time ago. You know, why is this coming up again? But I prefer the word trust. So I practice, I see how it works, I gain trust through the experience. And that's what he's saying. What do? You experience it through the practice, and then we see the results, and we gain trust in the practice, if indeed it works for us, right? I used to have a bumper sticker on my old car that says, "Don't trust everything you believe. Don't believe everything you think." And he says it down here a little bit better. It says, I do not devalue thoughts. Just don't mix up what you think with what actually is." And I think that's excellent. And why? It has to do with what you just said. Because everything is passing. What you're thinking about is already gone. So why give it any value? Just because it came up, it doesn't mean that you've got to mix it up with what actually is. Because what it actually is has nothing to do with just what you thought about 30 microseconds ago. It's actually gone. So I'm really enjoying this, and once again, thank you for what you contributed. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Dr. G. Yeah, that whole thing about faith, it's, I guess we're so deeply conditioned to think of faith as a belief, but in Zen, the beliefs don't work. But a state of being that we're present to and we cultivate becomes faith itself. It's more of a state of being than a state of believing.
Yeah, I've had to redefine that word for myself so it sits right.
Yeah.
Or else it makes my stomach flip a little. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Shikan. I just, since there's so many of us here, if you would like to offer your thoughts, please bow in, and I'll try to moderate between somebody in the Zendo, and I can't see everybody, so bow in and speak. Walter, hi.
Hi. I just wanted to thank you for that excellent talk. You really helped unpack a lot of what he was saying in this chapter, because some of the stuff was, for me, it was like ungraspable, not to make a bad pun, but it's like when you understand impermanence, you understand the nature of suffering and no self. And by expanding that a little bit, just understanding, the concept of impermanence, and then, just that there is no self, and the suffering that you're thinking of is, not here. I mean, it's already gone. That greatly helped. So thank you very much.
Yeah, and we're all like little flashlights trying to survive in this world, but we're just in that river flowing. And when we try to compete against that flow, or that, more and more I realize that our self-conscious efforts, like I'm doing this, I'm the doer, I'm the one who's in control, it's like a flashlight trying to compete with the sun,
Shikan, thank you again. I was particularly struck by the line, nirvana and impermanence are like front and back. When you understand impermanence, you find peace. Mm-hmm. When in a way, for me, it's kind of like, oh yeah, there is not much about me that's not changing. But we live so much in our heads, and we think that what we think is real. But as we know, if we're really honest, it's not real. It's just a thought. I once was listening to someone famous, whom most people probably wouldn't recognize, talking about Zen practice and how quickly these moments pass. And the amount of time it takes for our physical bodies to process sensation, perception, reaction, and finally it's in our consciousness, that moment is gone. Maybe many moments have passed since it reached into our heads. So in a way, we're living our life as if we're watching it in a rear view mirror. If you've ever had that experience of being a passenger in the car and if you just watch where you're going in the rear view mirror, that it gave me that concrete sense of, oh, okay, my life just is going like this, and each moment is different, just like each piece of the scenery is different as we're driving. So that was a helpful way for me to understand what that in every day there's 6,400,999 180 moments. I mean,
and Buddha said that. So how did he know? How did he know? We didn't have science to look at nanotechnology back then.
Somebody counted
Right.
as they were sitting, but yeah, that's all I want to say is just, if you don't get it or feel it, or it's all confusing, you're in good company. So just begin to test it. As Gabriel said, we have to test it for ourselves, think about it, see if it's really true. But impermanence is undeniable.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, and also, we spend a lot of time talking about the present moment, but moments are also ungraspable. It's our power of thinking that divides reality or presence into moments. But a more accurate way of saying it, there's no totally accurate way, but it's more like ever-presence. We're just in this ever-presence. Yeah. And it really doesn't take a whole, when we hear about, we're just being reborn all the time, we're nothing, it feels overwhelming. It can feel overwhelming, but it doesn't take a big change in our motivation. It just takes a little bit of change, we're just this little flashlight, but if we turn off the flashlight, don't grasp, learn how not to grasp our thoughts and not turn away from our experience and just be present to it. The sun is always here.
Thank you for your talk again. We're laughing because this is my third time trying.
Oh.
And I really appreciated your talk. And I think that when I think about ungraspable moments, it's impossible for me to ever be bored, because there's always something going on somewhere, even if I'm not aware of it. So I think boredom is a kind of a feature of not recognizing that changing moment and the ungraspable nature of everything. So that's all I have to offer. I got it in.
Thank you. Thanks, Gato.
Like the point that he made that he said, there's no present, there's no past, and there's no future, and in fact, there's no now. Which really actually made a lot of sense to me, that it's nothing but a continuous flow, and there's no control over that flow. And I've had the wonderful fortune over the last couple of years of having had a number of unfilled medical procedures where they put you out. And every time I wake up, I just kind of wonder, like you mentioned, where was my consciousness? Where was it? It wasn't there. Even though everything was flowing, I wasn't necessarily present. And that's given me a lot of food, I shouldn't say for thought, but just for meditating and sitting still.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Thanks, Joseph. Gary.
Tequila sunrise.
Yeah.
We're kind of at the end, but this is a very rich discussion. Would anyone else like to offer some comments? Wow, Gary, you shut them up. If you raise your hand, I can't really see you right now because I'm on the gallery view. Okay, well, I'll just, before we close, I would just like to welcome back Shojun, Gary Shepherd, raise your hand, Gary wave. Gary moved up north, but now he's, I guess, settled into his new life, and with Margaret and Emmett, and now hopefully he'll be able to join us regularly. And I'd like to welcome Vinny and Daria, wave. This is, they just participated in the orientation last night and will be coming to the Zendo in person at the next opportunity.
We have someone to welcome too.
Oh, good.
Deborah Hogan has joined us for the first time tonight.
Can't see you, Deborah, but I'll take the word for it that you're really there. Any announcements? Well, on November 9th, there will be a half days of Zenkai, so please plan to spend part of your 3-day weekend on that Saturday with us in the Zendo. So let's close with the 4 vows.
Limitless, I vow to free them. Visions are inexhaustible. I vow to transform them. Reality is boundless. I vow to perceive it. Enlightened ways unsurpassable. I vow to embody it. Visions are numberless. I vow to free them. Visions are inexhaustible. I vow to transform them. Reality is boundless. I vow to perceive it. Enlightened ways unsurpassable. I vow to embody it. Visions are limitless. I vow to free them. Visions are inexhaustible. I vow to transform them. Reality is boundless. I vow to receive it. Enlightened way is unsurpassable.